Okay, let's get started. Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm super excited to see so many people here and a lot of people registered for this, which I think is just so, um, I don't know, it feels like we're talking about silence, which is just very ironic already, but it feels like there's such an appetite for this. Maybe I'm projecting. I certainly have it, but has been a lot of interest. There's like 500 people signed up for this, and so that kind of tells me, this is how it looks to me: is we can talk forever. We can understand. We can look toward understandings. We can share concepts. We can look at frameworks and paradigms and share all kinds of metaphors and all of this stuff, which has been amazing and so helpful for so many of us. But at some point, it's like those, and I know we've all heard this a billion times, but those are just the pointers. At some point, those we have to follow what all these words are pointing toward, and throw away the words and set aside the paradigms and set aside the frameworks and the understanding. And 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 it feels like what all of these words and all of this amazing understanding and explorations have done for all of us is point us toward silence, point us toward something that is just more immediate and true and just authentic. I don't know, just more alive and more right here than any word could ever be. So I'm guessing many of you have felt a similar thing to me, where at some point it's just kind of like enough with the words. They've done their job. Again, super grateful for them. But now they've done their job and we don't need to keep shoving more in. At this point, it's like, let's just be and see what's actually here right this minute, rather than the way that the mind loves to look out and overlook this and look for something else that can understand or collect or whatever. So anyway, I'm just really happy to see that many of you seem to agree or are feeling a similar kind of tug, maybe. And that tug, again, is always ultimately taking us to silence, to something that's right here, right now, in the stillness. It's not more stuff. So in this class, webinar, whatever we want to call this, I do have 2 hours set aside. Um, this is a little bit of my idea and my agenda, and please feel free to stay on for as much as you can. I'd love for you to stay on for the whole time if you're able to, but totally understand if you can't. We're going to send the recording to everyone. So if you need to drop off, that's fine. I want to talk a little bit about the impact that silence has had for me, and just some of the benefits, I guess. It kind of seems weird to say it that way, but just look at what it's like to really be in silence in a more prolonged way, if possible, but even in just finding the silence in everything and some of the benefits of that. I will talk a little bit about the silent retreat that I'm leading in February, just mostly to give a sense of what that would look like what the days look like, because I think there's a lot of questions if you haven't done one before of what that's going to look like. What will I do? So I'll speak a little bit about some of that. Whether this is about meditation, which it's not, by the way. I don't know what meditation is. It's not about practicing any formal meditation technique at all. But I know there's a lot of questions about that. So I'll speak to that. And then I'll open it up to you guys for anything you want to share. And as I'm sharing, also feel free to post any questions that you have in the chat as they come up. And then what I was hoping to do, I'm hoping that that all takes 90 minutes ish, or maybe even less. And then I'd love to just take like a couple minute short break and then come back and have a little silence together. So again, if you aren't able to stay on for that long, that's okay. But if you are, I thought I would just sort of walk us through a little bit of a guided meditation just for like a minute or so to kind of get it started. And then we'll just actually be in be in what we're talking about rather than just talk about it. Okay. So, all right. So it's so funny to talk about silence, like, and I find this really difficult. I find everything that I try to talk about, I find it difficult to talk about, but this maybe especially because it just feels um, so impossible to kind of put words to. But I also understand that I don't think you all need a lot of words because we're all the same. We all kind of sense this and can feel into it. I guess, to me, silence just feels like it seems weird even to call it like the ultimate teacher, which is sort of a cliche phrase anyway, but it does feel like that. And the reason it seems weird is because it isn't like teaching anything. It's almost revealing. It's almost like in silence, there's just the essentials. There's just what is. There's no hiding. There's no um after a while anyway, in silence, there's no deluding ourselves. There's no hiding in identities. There's no distraction and pushing away. Now, I don't mean to suggest that as soon as you sit in silence, everything falls silent internally and everything is revealed. It certainly isn't that way most of the time. There can be a lot of stuff happening, right? Internally, emotionally, mentally, no question. But this is the beauty, I think, in looking toward, and not even looking toward, but maybe looking from that still silent place, is all of this, whatever's happening is just what's happening. There's no attempt to change anything. There's no need to change anything. There's no need even to welcome anything or allow or accept anything. Even that is too much. There's just this sense of being, period. And whatever is, and nothing has to be any different. And I think that's so foreign for us in a sense because we're running around in our lives for the most part with most of our attention up in thought a lot. Attention is in these narratives. These narratives are running, and it's me and my life and where I'm going, and I like this and I don't like that, and this should have happened and that shouldn't have. And as we all know, these narratives have been running and getting the majority of our attention forever. Like for a really, 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 not forever, but for a really long time since we were 2 or 3 years old. And so we don't even though we all know this, right? And we can even notice it in when you're out in your life, busy life, you can notice at times when attention is up in a narrative like that. I think the fact of the matter is it's really easy for that narrative to just kind of keep the attention up there and for us to just go along with it and not really see the extent or feel the extent to which that is happening. And it's okay that that happens. I'm not saying that we're all doing life wrong or that there's any problem in that. But what's so revealing about just being, like being in silence without the distraction, without the ability to run away or even run up into thought that much after a bit, is it just kind of shows what is. And it's almost like it's just right here for you. Um, and when we're in silence with some degree of curiosity, some degree of desire to see what's going on, to watch the mind do what it does and to be in whatever's arising, just some degree of curiosity and desire to see that we see it and we see it in a very, very clear way, which again, I think is not really possible or just doesn't really happen when we're distracted and we're running around in life quite so much. So, at some point it feels like we kind of see that silence is sort of the only place to go. It's like the last, I certainly feel this way for myself. Like, I don't need to learn anything else. I don't need to hear anything else. I don't need to practice anything else. I don't need to practice silence either. But I mean, the information gathering, learning, chasing kind of phase of things, it gets exhausting. We kind of hit a point with that. And when that happens, it's like, well, where else? There's nothing else. And I think it's such a beautiful thing, um, when it starts to feel that way, when it starts to look like, hey, let me just rest in this being rather than kind of going out and gathering and searching more. So silence gives this incredible opportunity to just kind of swim in that. Often there are a lot of fears and concerns about silence, especially if we're talking about doing something like being in silence on a retreat for 5 days. Um, and I think that's really normal because think about it. I mean, it kind of is scary. It's very foreign. It's very different. But the scary part is this momentum, which is just a movement in consciousness that has tons of attention and gets tons of respect, and we believe it. And of course, like it dies in a sense when we're in silence. This sense of a me, which I'll talk about in a minute, this sense of like how this sense of me is created, how the mind is narrating everything and kind of creating time, past and future, and you, and how it all fits together. In silence, it's no longer. It'll still go, of course. When you're sitting there, it will still go, but again, what I'm pointing to is that we're kind of under it. We're kind of seeing it play out for what it is. And when you watch it play out for what it is, it just doesn't have that same impact. You're not duped by it in the same way. So so it really kind of dies in a sense. It's not the same once it's really seen. It doesn't feel the same once it's really seen. And so I think, I don't know, but it sure seems like the mind just kind of is an energy system that really just wants to keep that attention on it. And when we're starting to be quiet or question it or not believe it quite so much, it tends to ramp up a little bit. And so it makes sense that thought would say things like, "Oh, silence, that's so boring. That seems so boring. Why would we not want to be up here in imagination and time and future and past and me and becoming and improving and all of that? That's where the excitement is. It's certainly where all the drama is. Just being here in what's here in actual reality, that seems very boring to thought. And so I just point that out to say it's a common fear, a common concern, and makes sense that thought would say that, right? But I think of like the Plato's cave allegory where the prisoners are chained their entire lives to a cave, looking at a cave wall, seeing shadows dance on the wall from what's actually behind them outside the cave, thinking that's the world. That was the whole world. And then they get free. And of course, it kind of looks like they didn't even want to leave the cave. It looks like, oh, I don't know what that is, but this is amazing and this is exciting. And it's very ironic because thought will say that silence is boring or I don't want to do that or that seems uncomfortable or whatever. But really it's this kind of reflective, repetitive monotony of thought, of narrative thought that has us feeling like I know what's coming, I know who I am. We feel stuck sometimes. We feel like our life just isn't going anywhere. Like that's what's boring relative to what's actually here and alive outside of that imaginary narrative. So kind of funny that thought would call real life boring, but it does. And I think other fears, it seems like it's going to be uncomfortable. There's a certain restlessness that can come from being in silence, of course, initially, especially. Um, but again, what's restless? Silence isn't restless. Stillness isn't restless. It's thought that's restless. It's the mind that's restless, and it is always restless and probably always will be. I don't know that that ever changes. I don't know that the mind ever settles down and just decides to chill out. Maybe it does to some extent, but it seems that more often what happens is it just doesn't matter. It's not given so much thought, it's not given so much attention and so much respect, and all the attempts to make it be not so restless and to make it calmer and all of it. Being in silence and watching the mind just do what it does just really completely kind of kind of shines a light on it, kind of shows, oh, this is what has been seemingly running my life. Like this reflective, repetitive, me centered thinking. And I can say that, and I mean, I know many of you have probably experienced that, and we can have glimpses of that for sure in any time. I mean, this you don't need silence to really see that by any stretch. I just think it's easier. It's easier in silence because, in our everyday life, that thinking, we're distracted, we're busy, and so it's just so natural and familiar to go back into all of that. Um, But there is something about saying no, like I'm just here for whatever shows up and I'm just watching whatever shows up. You don't leave that seeing what's showing up in the same way. It just feels like it's very hard to describe, but it just kind of feels like, yeah, like you have a backstage pass to sort of like see it all play out. It's like watching a magic trick, watching how a magic trick is done. It's just different after you've seen how the trick works. You can still even have a little suspense of like, how will it go? But you're just not fooled by it in the same way. It's just really different. And this opportunity that we almost never really take of really just being and watching. And again, I feel like watching is even almost too much because there's not an activity here that has to be done, but just a truly being in what is so rare, and um it's just so illuminating. Things it yeah, I just can't say it more clearly than that. It just really shows you what's happening. And that's just the thought side of it. There's a lot emotionally too, which I'll talk about. But this kind of push and pull that happens in the mind, in thought, is always happening, and so much so that we kind of don't even recognize it anymore. I think we get to a point where we just, life feels a little uncomfortable, but it's also just what we're used to. But there's that when I say that push and pull, I mean this sense of being a me that needs things to go a certain way. I want more of this, I want less of that. It's constant, constant. And we might look around and say, well, yeah, of course it's constant. That's what it means to be a human being. That's life. But it's not. It's a movement in thought. And it's a movement in thought that when we kind of see that from another angle, when we are just in it and we're watching it with that degree of curiosity, it just looks different. You just are onto the creation. It doesn't have that same impact. And when there's no push and pull on experience, when there's no, it needs to be this way or it should be that way, and like as that dies down, again, that's where there's silence in the center of everything. There is silence in the center of everything now, but it's like it just doesn't matter so much what's happening internally, externally. There's no difference between internally and externally. It doesn't matter so much what's happening. What is. It's okay. There is no me that it's happening to, and there is no need for it to be different than it is. And I don't know any greater peace than that. Like we can imagine something where nothing bad ever happens. That's never going to be. We can imagine that we get to some state where we only feel nice feelings. I don't think that's real. I think that's a fairy tale. think the reality of it is life unfolds the way that life unfolds, and it always has. But man, to be able to notice that push and pull and see that is nothing but a habitual movement in consciousness that has been going on, yes, since we were 2 or 3. So I don't want to dismiss how real it feels and how habitual it is to get in that. But to get kind of behind it, get kind of under it and see it happening and be able to just be in that a lot of the tension and the sense of fighting and the struggle and just the underlying stress and the restlessness and all of that just can begin to look really different just by a simple being in what is. So I want to go through 6 kind of a weird way to say it. It feels weird to me, like 6 kind of features or benefits of being in silence. And I have some slides just because there's 6, and I just to kind of make sure this doesn't all ramble together. Um, but I want to say a couple caveats. I mean, one, the biggest one, this is not for me anyway, and I can only speak for my how this all looks to me. It's not about experience. It's what I was just saying. It's about kind of looking toward a place where experience comes and goes and it's all fine. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have such, and I don't mean it doesn't matter in a I don't care dismissive kind of way either. It's fully embraced and it's gone before we even have time to embrace it. Experience is just constantly moving. There is this aliveness in life, in everything. It's not in the abstractions of the mind. The abstractions of the mind feel like a slog. They're slow. They're putting stakes in the ground. They're rigid. It's black and white. Here's what's good. Here's what should be. That is feels very slow and sluggish. When we're not in that, which we all know, we have all felt not having our attention all in thought and just being here more in life, it's sensational and it's vibrant and it's fast and it's fluid and it's alive. And that is always here. It's really just this matter of kind of attention, I guess, and just what looks like what to us, you know? And um, so I think what we come to see in silence, especially in longer period of silence, is there's a lot that's moving and changing all the time, and that's fine. It just is what it is. It doesn't even make sense to try to make that different because it's so fluid. It's always changing. It's not who we are. It's not what we are. It's not, it doesn't matter. It's okay. It is what it is. And then there's also something that is not always changing, that stillness that doesn't go all over the place, that doesn't ebb and flow. And that maybe right now that feels like it's kind of more in the background. I feel like that was for me. It felt like this background kind of sense that was sometimes there and often not. And then the drama of everyday life and thought and feeling was front and center. And that can switch a little bit. So all of this to say that being in silence for me anyway is definitely not about having some kind of blissful experience or transcendent experience or some kind of insight, any specific insights. Those things will happen. Probably also will happen will be restlessness and boredom and some other emotions that maybe aren't so comfortable. It's all going to be there, but it's more about seeing the bit that's always coming and going and changing versus the bit that's not. And the other big caveat is I have no clue what would happen. So I'm sharing again from my own experience and in general, what I've heard from people who are in silence frequently and some of what they've shared. But you know, we never know. We never know for on an individual basis what's going to transpire. But I really just yeah, I think there's no bad way to do this. I think when you're in silence, again, we're not looking for anything in particular. We're open to what wants to be revealed. And so anything that takes place is, it just is what it is. Okay, so I'm gonna see if I can share my screen really quick and just go through a few of these slides. This isn't going to be long, and then we'll be able to um, talk with you guys a little bit. Uh, Okay, can you guys all see my screen? Okay, awesome. This, I don't know if that's in the way or not. Maybe it's just for me. Okay, so um, maybe the biggest, I don't know, you can rank order them yourself, I guess. But for me, the most important, kind of the whole point of this is that being in this stillness without the distraction, without the ability to jump up and run around and move away from, just being in what is, it really, as I was just saying, it really makes clear what's always here, what's never changing. It makes it really clear versus what's constantly changing. So you're there watching experience come and go, not interacting with it quite so much, not jumping away from it into conditioned action, just being there in it. And in that, there becomes this sense, it's almost like the movement. It's just a metaphor, but it's almost like all the chaos and the movement and the stuff, the thoughts and the feelings, like they just like jump out. Like there's that, but then there's also something here. It's like, well, what isn't moving? What isn't changing? What made people say it sometimes, like what's watching all of this? What is aware of all of this? I don't love that language myself, but it doesn't matter. It's all the same. What's always here and what's always changing. And that bit that's always here, I've talked about it in the past on podcasts and stuff as a purring cat, as like just different ways of talking about it. But what I hear and what I've experienced is it starts as this kind of subtle background sense, and then it kind of moves to be the most obvious thing. So it's almost, you can think of it almost like a background foreground shift. There's a background sense, perhaps, of stillness and silence and peace and just unwavering. It just isness. And then there's everything that we think we are. There's bodies and people and personalities and thoughts and feelings and worries and all of it. And none of it goes away. We don't need it to, but there's that kind of shift, where that purring cat that was sort of always there in the background being like, it's all right, I'm back here, it's all good, even though all the drama's happening, gets louder. And it's like the leading force almost, where all the other stuff is happening as well. But again, after sitting and kind of watching the creation of this, watching the coming and going of it, rather than how we are in our everyday lives where we're fully in it, we feel immersed with it and we are it and all of that. By this stance of kind of watching it all happen, it just takes its rightful place. And for me, and I'm not articulating this in any accurate way, but I'm just hopefully pointing to something you can get a sense of. This is really what it's about, is just that piece is becomes so much more palpable. Life doesn't change, life doesn't need to change, but it feels and looks different. So a second one is knowing. These are all basically the same thing, but but kind of looking at from different angles. Knowing firsthand, experientially knowing that all experience is safe. So me and many other people talk about this all the time, that it is safe, that it is fleeting, that it's not you, that it's not yours. And by it, I mean thoughts and feelings and worries and insecurities and all of it, everything that moves. We talk about it as weather moving through the sky. We've all heard a gazillion metaphors. We've heard this a million times. And probably, hopefully, in all that hearing about it and exploring it, being open to it ourselves, it has landed in some way. I know it has, it for sure does. It resonates, it lands. This stuff helps. But it's like in silence, that's where you get the experiential knowing of it. You're there, not running, nowhere to run, nowhere to go. And there's this sense of almost watching, just watching it rise and leave over and over. And that just does something. I think it just really does something for us. We feel and watch and witness life come and go, and there's nothing that has to be done or changed or anything. And that leaves you with the sense of resilience, with a much deeper knowing that anything that comes up, I can feel it. I am it. We're designed for it. There's not even, we'll get to this, but there's not like I'm here feeling that, even those boundaries go away in enough silence. So it's just what is here. And there's just a real sense of emotional resilience, I think, that really starts to happen. Um, so this last point is, especially if you're with others, which I'll talk more about, but to see that emotion can be felt, and expressed when it needs to be, and that nothing, like words aren't needed, interaction isn't needed, can be super powerful. So when I did my first silent retreat, this was really one of the most impactful things for me, was seeing that in a week, stuff came up for sure. And there was emotion, and it would come and it would go. And so we're noticing that for ourselves, but you're also seeing it for the people around you. And I know it can feel a little cold. We're so conditioned to like comfort people and help them and come to their aid and all of that. But just be curious about that. I know it's well-meaning, and I know it's very nice and helpful at times, but it also is not necessary. It is absolutely not necessary. Emotion is not a problem that needs comforting. Emotion is a normal part of life. Thoughts are not something that need to be looked away from or distracted from. They are a normal part of life. All of this stuff is incredibly normal and safe, and what is meant to be. It's not a problem. If you have a huge bit of anger coming up, you don't have an anger problem. You are a normal energetic system feeling more energy, that then the mind calls anger, and then the mind on top of that says, oh, anger's bad. My parents wouldn't let me feel that when I was little, and so I know that's a dangerous one. It's all lies. And we only feel that and see that, or we more easily feel that and see that when we're in this place where it's like it's just doing what it's doing. And we don't need to comfort ourselves. We don't need to rush to comfort others. And that doesn't mean we don't have compassion. We feel so much compassion for people around us, especially if you're sitting there in silence for a week. Trust me, like you have all kinds of relationships with the people around you, even though there's no eye contact and no talking with them. But nothing is needed because there is no problem. And that was just so impactful for me to see, really, even though I knew this intellectually beforehand, to really be in that and see, wow, this isn't something no one needs to rush to their aid. And again, we rush to aid for all kinds of reasons, often very well-meaning, and often because we're uncomfortable with emotion. So to feel it and to see other people feel it and not have to do that is a huge gift. Okay, so the third one, is kind of watching this, what we might call the selfing mechanism at play. So part of like, there is no way to be in silence. There's nothing you have to do. You do whatever you want to do, or you do nothing. But what I kind of recommend is this thing called natural meditation, or what Adyashanti calls true meditation, which is not a practice at all. It's simply being in what is. Nothing needs to be different. Nothing needs to be interfered with. Nothing needs to be helped. You're just simply watching the arising and the dissolving of everything with no interference. It just is what it is. And again, as I was saying in the very beginning, as we do that, you get a front row seat or backstage seat to the creation and then the immediate dissolution of this sense of me. And you don't need a silent retreat to do this. Again, that stands for everything I'm sharing. You can see this in your everyday life, but it's much easier when you're not distracted so much and when you're in that position of watching it all come and go. But this sense of me, I mean, it's pretty hilarious, to really kind of watch the mind, just watch thought form and say, oh, I'm a little uncomfortable. I think I'm in a shift. Oh, I wonder what time it is. I'm hungry. Oh, I like this. Look how great I'm doing. Look how quiet my mind is. Like it will just go and go. And you get to see, for better or worse, you get to see the themes. And these themes are probably not unfamiliar to you. But again, we don't always get this sort of vantage point to really watch them and just see this whole process happen. You get to see your mind's favorite themes, what your mind loves to talk about, how it loves to build you, how it loves to kind of create this idea of you and who you are and what you're good at and what people think of you and what you're going to say about this experience when you go home, when what you're going to eat for lunch as soon as that bell rings, and like all of this. And it's just fascinating. And there's maybe not even much more I can say except that it will not look the same afterward. I'm not saying it will stop. It may never stop, but it will not look the same when we have this opportunity to kind of just sit and watch it. And in the silent retreat that I'm leading, I'll give some guidance on that because I do feel like this is a massive benefit. And again, it doesn't require any special practice or technique. But there is this sense of kind of looking for that happening and watching it happening that yeah, really, really illuminating. Talk about that later. Okay. Um, so the fourth one is seeing what wants to be seen and maybe better said, feeling what wants to be felt. Um, there's something very, again, true and genuine about silence in that, and I know this phrase can sound kind of scary if you think this seems like a horrible experience, but like there's nowhere to hide. I don't know. I felt for a lot of my life like I was inauthentic in some way, not intentionally so, but I had for many, many years this very strong feeling that something just wasn't quite right. Like I felt like maybe I was wearing some kind of mask. And again, it wasn't a thing that felt intentional or like I really had a choice in the matter, but it was like I could almost sense that there was just something inauthentic about the way that I would um, be around different people, or I don't know, however that went. It was just a nagging sense, and maybe that's not everyone, but there is something again in like just the raw nakedness of silence where if there are identities being clung to for protection, if there are masks being worn so that you can feel better about yourself, like when that stuff's there, I think if it's there to be seen, it's seen because we're not running around in life doing a bunch of other stuff purposely, in a sense, looking away from it. That's it. It just strips away our ability to grab a phone or watch a Netflix or have a conversation. Um, and so what wants to be seen is seen. And this can sound scary, I think, in particular, because there's so much um, out there about like I've heard many people say, like, I'm kind of afraid that if I sit in silence, maybe I have these old traumas that are going to come up. Maybe I don't, maybe it's good that my mind is pushing that away, and that I think that's very, very honest and very understandable concern. but I think it is rooted in, I think that's thought saying that, saying don't go there, keep listening to me, I'll keep you safe, which is exactly what thought would say. And I also feel like that is kind of, I don't know, I feel like it's a little bit of a misunderstanding, but it's not that it's consider that maybe it's not that there is some big, huge pain that's just under the surface waiting for the opportunity to attack you. It's more that forever, every moment of our life in silence and in not, there's this opportunity to just be in what's here right now. Because some trauma that happened years ago is only a thought right now. I'm not saying that there wasn't something. I'm not saying that there isn't some effect, some physical, maybe, or emotional effect of it right this minute, but it's not the trauma that you're feeling. It's what's here right this minute. That's all we ever have. It's literally what is present right here, what is present right here to feel. And the mind is very, very, very good at pushing that away and distracting us from it. In silence, that stops happening at a certain point. The mind stops doing all that, and what is here to be felt is felt. And yes, sometimes anger, sometimes grief, sometimes stuff comes up. But again, we're designed for that. The fear around that, the fear of like, I don't want to feel that stuff, and like, well, what if I cry in public and all of that? Like that is thought. That is the self, which is nothing but thought. Ego, nothing but thought. The beauty, it's never what thought tells us it's going to be. Feeling emotion, and I don't want to give the impression either that you go sit in silence and everybody is wailing, because it's definitely not that. There's more laughter and bliss usually than, or at least as much as the other side. So again, I don't know what's going to happen. No one knows. You don't know either. Your mind doesn't know either. No one knows. It's all just whatever wants to be there, and it's all the same, and it's all okay, but it's not what your mind tells you it's going to be. Never is. So I'll just say that, like, the mind will make emotion feel like, whether you're in silence or not, like it's scary and it's dangerous and all of that. And of course it does. That's kind of part of its job. But thought doesn't know silence, and thought doesn't know emotion. Thought is just reflective. It just repeats itself. It's just building a you and saying the same stuff it's always said. It doesn't know, it doesn't have an ability to know anything. Silence is what's true. When we just get behind all of that thought, that's when we really get to tap into something that's a little more real and not biased and creative and conditioned and all of that. We're getting to the unconditioned. So the giant upside of this also is that often, and we all know this in our own way, that when stuff does come up that wants to be seen and felt, it feels amazing. Feels amazing to finally feel that. And there's all kinds of extreme and many less extreme examples of what happens. I mean, even from like chronic pain changing to habits and things going away, because we're just innocently walking around in thought, which is like, don't look there, don't need to look there, just keep listening to me. And when that all thins out a little bit, and we're just in what is, and maybe we feel some stuff that's been wanting to be felt, the positive effects of that can be just massive. Okay. So the last two I'm going to go through pretty quickly because they might be, well, I don't know. But the fifth one is shifts in energy. And I wanted to mention this just because it has been a huge part of the experience for me. And it's not for everyone. And I don't know, obviously, what'll happen for anyone or what'll happen to me next time. But um, physically, things can shift. Energetically, I guess, is the way to say it. Things can shift. And my understanding of this is that, which may or may not be really accurate, is that when there's so much, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of attention to be up in the narrative, up in the abstraction all the time, which we largely are. And as attention is kind of seeing that for what it is and not going there so much, often people experience what they describe as maybe like a heart opening, or there's just energetic changes that kind of happen physically, or that can happen physically. So Yeah. Oh, and also because of the social aspect. So I have here when attention and energy aren't focused in thoughts and social interactions, that energy has a chance to settle down and in, so to speak. Um, that was something I saw too, because often if you're on a silent retreat, there's no eye contact, there's no obviously speaking to other people. You kind of don't even really like hold doors open. You might, but there's just that, those kind of social things, we sort of take those off the table. And it was really shocking for me to see how much I just felt like how like that was freeing up a lot of energy, like how much attention and energy in a typical life goes toward kind of, hey, how you doing? Shaking your head, like making the eye contact, saying bless you when someone sneezes. These are all things we do very naturally, but it's still a lot. And when that's cut off, when we're not doing those, it just, again, I don't know how to explain it, but it just felt like there was a lot of energy that came from somewhere. And I assume that's maybe where it came from. So there can be and may not be, um, just this sense of the body being very alive. For me, it felt like I was on an airplane that was taking off, and I just felt sometimes like a lot of physical pressure. Nothing was uncomfortable or not, feelable. But it's just something worth noting. And then the last one is gets a little sticky with the words, but something like gratitude or love being seen as the natural ground. So I know we talk about these a lot as emotions, as something that comes and goes. You feel gratitude toward someone or something, or love toward someone and something. And that's beautiful. And it's a fleeting experience, just like hatred toward someone or something. They're the same. They come and go, and they go. Um, but what I'm talking to here is a little different. And again, the words kind of, I don't want to make it a thing, but it does seem that in that foreground background switch, in that sense of what is that deeper knowing of what is always here, that feels very alive and palpable, something that we might call gratitude or love just seems to be there by default. Like it's just there. It's causeless. It's not directed toward anything. It's not about anything. It's very clear that it's not directed toward or about anything or from anything. In that place, those words don't even really make sense. It's just not, it's not a for or about or a cause and effect like it's beyond all of that. It just feels like the ground, just feels like what is. So I wanted to read this quote that for me encapsulates the whole thing. And this is just a quote that I found online from someone who um, had done a silent retreat, had a prolonged period of silence. And this person's experience really just spoke to me so much. Like I could not say it any better. I feel like I could have written this, but not so articulately. So they said, right now, what I feel is most special to me is that I've rediscovered a deep feeling of devotion to and awareness of something so precious, so beautiful, beyond the arising and passing of all things, including this body. Our true nature resting effortlessly in a state of stillness and peace that has never been disturbed, and which also has never been in conflict. I deeply realize that this human life is all about returning home to the basic ground of our being and ending our sense of separation from all that is around us. My wish is for everyone to get in touch with that precious source of energy that is always there waiting for us to find our way back to it. I love that just, um, I don't know, that word being, because I mean, that's just kind of what you're left with. there's, there's nothing else to do. We're just in that being and I know you've all felt it, and maybe you feel like you really live in it, which is beautiful and amazing, and maybe not, and that's fine too. But we don't have to travel anywhere for that. You can't. Like, how far would you travel to feel that deep sense of your being? You don't move. It's still. It's here. It's always been here. It's never been in conflict. It's never been disturbed. It's it's so much bigger than this body and the sense of a me with a life that's going well or not going so well. So much bigger. It just is the witness to things that are so fleeting, like nationality and gender and my past and my future. And those again in the relative, those can be such a juicy, like beautiful part of the story of me and my life. But they are part of the story of me and my life. And when you sit in silence in any capacity, you start to see that story as a story. It is a story. Right here, right now, in this stillness, where are you? The mind has to kick in and say, oh, I'm right here. Here's my body. That's a bunch of thought. That's not you. Oh, I'm the one. Who are you? Like the mind has to kick in and say, oh, I'm the one that grew up here and went to college here and now I'm about to retire. That's not here. That is nowhere here. That is only in mind. It's only in imagination. In actual reality, right here, right now, which is all that we're sinking into in silence, it's so clear that all the rest is this amazing, whatever it is, appearances and coming and going and play. And it's beautiful and it's emotional and it's good and it's horrible sometimes. And there's something else that's never budged. And so, again, I just feel like the words, I'm so grateful that so many people are interested in this. And again, I know it's just another way of speaking, but um, stop that. All the words that we've all heard and that we'll continue to hear. And it's great to read and listen and follow the words, but they're all just pointers to that sense of something that's never changed. And it's okay to throw the pointers away. It's not disrespectful. It's beautiful. It's respectful, actually. Like they were never, it's like the training wheels, it's not cool to be 10 with the training wheels anymore. It's cool to be 6 with training wheels. By the time you're 10, you're done. You don't need them anymore. And all those words have just been training wheels. And now maybe you're feeling a similar kind of pull to kind of say, okay, I don't need to add more. I'm going to just get quiet and see what silence has to show. Um, I'm gonna say a little bit more about the retreat, but I want to invite you to ask any questions you have about anything I've shared so far. You can raise your hand or you can put them in the chat. How are we doing on time? Okay. Um, yeah, so I'll do that. So I'll say a little bit about, and again, I'd want to make sure that I hope that this is helpful as a pointer, no matter what, because I know, it's not like you have to go somewhere and hole up and be completely silent and have no eye contact for some number of days. There's no magic technique around this. It's just one way to really immerse in this and swim in this, but you do it your way. You do what's manageable for you. And even hopefully just hearing these pointers and like just even right now, even with my voice going and all the sounds around you, maybe you can feel the essence of something, that this is all stillness kind of coming out as noise and words and sound. Um, yeah, just kind of feeling into that. So this can look any way that it looks. But I do want to share a little bit, I guess, um, about how it will look on the retreat that I'm running anyway, which I'm just super excited about because I can't wait to get back to this. Just feels good, like just that, like right here, just kind of anchoring into that. Um, and I know there have been some questions about meditation and things like that, and kind of what you do, even just mentally, what you do for 5 days in silence. And so the retreat that I'm running is the last week of February, and it's happening in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Um, and it's in a gorgeous, like top of the mountain setting there, in a very private area. So we have sort of a lodge. It's a larger campus where different retreats happen. But we have kind of a private area of the campus with a big lodge and a big area where we will gather to have our silence. So you would be with other people all together for most of that day, which is a beautiful thing because it's so nice. Something happens in the energy in that room, especially as the days go on when you're kind of surrounded with others in that. Um, each day will start, at least our program will start with me doing a little bit of a guided meditation. And again, that's kind of like a training wheels thing too. So that gives me an opportunity to say have a few pointers and share a little bit of stuff I want to share. That'll, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes maybe. And then we'll go into just some blocks of just silence. The blocks will be probably 30 to 40 minutes, and then we'll have like a short break. So you'll have 30 to 40 minutes of silence. There'll be a little bell or something, 5 minutes, 10 minutes to kind of walk around, and then we'll kind of come back for another session. You of course like do what you need to do. I mean, if you were to come on a silent retreat, you don't have to sit in that room for every single session. If you need to get up and go for a walk or go back to your room or whatever, you do it. You just do what's best for you, but that's kind of how the structure will happen. um, what's important about it to kind of keep the container and the integrity to where we don't have to interact, where we can just really be silent and go within, is that everything's kind of done for you. So it is. So we'll all be in one very easy lodge. The rooms all have balconies, so you could do a private or a shared room, but it's really beautiful. There's a balcony for every room. You can be outside, you can go for walks. All the meals are taken care of. They're all like buffet style. So again, so you don't have to talk to anyone. It's very easy to just get your food. The meals will be in silence also, which for me was very kind of trippy when I first did this too, because it's just so against our conditioning. And you can hear all the knives and the forks clicking and like no one's looking. But it again, it just deepens in time. But just saying, for me anyway, that was one of that and people sneezing. When people would sneeze and to not say bless you, and for me to sneeze and not hear bless you was like, God, this just feels wrong. But I don't know. It just sort of reveals, what we're used to. Um, so the meals will be in silence. So we'll have 3 meals a day. We'll have those silent sessions. There will be a Q&A session every day. So you will have an opportunity to talk. You will have an opportunity to ask questions if you have them, just share what's coming up for you to get a little bit of support. So I think that piece is really important. So it's a mostly silent retreat every day. It depends how many people we have, but I would think probably 90 minutes or so for a Q&A. And then that'll give me an opportunity too to kind of share a little bit or, whatever feels helpful. And then we will also have a little bit of like breath work sessions and maybe like a sound meditation. There'll be some things like that sprinkled in, but mostly it'll be those silent sessions. What am I forgetting? So in terms of meditation, in the silence, what do you do in the silence? Well, I think you do whatever you do. If you need to focus on your breath, if you want to say a mantra, you do whatever it's led by your intuition. And I will share in the guided meditations and kind of in the structure around it, I'll help you kind of find what feels right for you to kind of remind you that this is about you and you following your own intuition and doing what feels right. But kind of very loosely, what I recommend is something like I mentioned here that is sometimes just called true meditation or natural meditation, which is really not meditation at all. It's just being in what is. It's just like it arises. Nothing needs to be different. Maybe what arises is, I hate this. That also doesn't need to be different. Maybe also what arises is, why is my mind so damn loud? And when is it going to finally kick in and be quiet? And like, how come they look so peaceful? Like that stuff's going to show up. It's fine. It's thought. It doesn't matter. It's inconsequential. It doesn't mean anything. There's nothing to push or pull on. There's nothing to avoid. It's not about getting into some state. If you think about it, all of that is the opposite of being in what is. That's a lot of work. We're not going to go sit in silence and then do a bunch of work. It just doesn't make sense. We can stay in our lives and do a bunch of work. So it's the opposite of all of that. There's no state to be in. Thought is not in your way. A very busy mind does not impact anything. And that's, again, that's something you see in silence because we're so used to thinking like thought gets in my way and thought is the enemy and it distracts me and it whatever. It's masking my peace. I mean, I get why it feels like that for sure, but there's a bigger sense in which to see that it's just what's happened. It's just coming up and then leaving. It's just repeating itself. And it's so beautiful. I mean, it's like such a gift. I think it's what we all want. It's just at a being in this place of really seeing it's all okay. I don't love it all, but I don't even have to love it all. It's all just whatever it is. It doesn't mean anything. Don't have to suppress anything. I don't have to distract from anything. And when you're just in it from that place, for a little bit, you really see that in a new way. I really saw that in a new way. Like it feels there's a sense really of resilience or just okayness in anything that might happen. If you've ever done something like run a marathon or give birth or had a really difficult conversation you were dreading, and you know how afterward you kind of feel like, yeah, I can do anything. It's kind of like that, but maybe not so hyped up. It's just kind of like, wow, anything can be here. And there just doesn't need to be so much pushing and pulling on it. So I'll give some pointers again at the retreat, even for like ways that we might kind of look at thought, a little bit of inquiry, a little bit of like, well, who's the one that's thinking this? Can I find a thinker? Like, but it's all very optional. It's whatever resonates with you, and your intuition will just kind of lead you through it. There was a question that was sent. There were a few questions that were sent, but I wanted to read this one, and I just use it as kind of a way to share a little bit about this. And I'm not this person, I won't, they're anonymous, but I'm not picking on them or anyone that feels this way, but I just really think this is important to look at. So the question was, is it necessary to meditate to experience peace and quiet? Well, that's the first part, but okay, let me read the second part. Is meditation helpful or harmful in that it reinforces the notion that I must do something to feel that inner peace? Okay, so is it necessary to meditate to experience peace and quiet? Um, this is where I think we all just need to actually look for ourselves. Because this question, and I'm not picking on the questioner or any of us that feel this way, it's coming from some kind of dogma. It's coming from a being told that something should be necessary or not necessary. And again, that happens all the time. I mean, life is full of that. But, if we just really look, like you be the authority on life. No expert knows more than you. No one knows more than you. We've all felt peace and quiet without meditation. I don't even know what meditation is. Again, we can probably define it in some way, but what even is meditation? What even is it? Is it going for a walk in the woods? I kind of think it is. Is it sitting and saying mantras? People would say it's that too. Like it's not a thing. That's an abstracted concept. So already we don't even, we're not all talking about the same thing. And obviously we know if we look to our own direct experience, we know we can feel peace and quiet without it. So I just say that because I know there's a lot of understandings that have positions on things, and that's fine, but they're training wheels, they're pointers. We can't go through our whole life listening to some philosophy's position on something that just doesn't even make sense. We have our own experience that's way wiser than that. And then is meditation helpful or harmful in that it reinforces the notion that I must do something to feel inner peace? I mean, meditation, whatever it is, does not reinforce that notion. It's just a behavior. Thought might tell you you need this to feel peace. That might be something a thought says. That's not meditation doing that. It's no different, really, this question. And again, I totally get where it's coming from. Um, and it can be helpful because we've, kind of went through an era where it was all about practice and technique and listen to gurus. And then many of us came into something that was like, no, you don't need that. But you don't need it, but it also doesn't make any kind of practice wrong. It doesn't negate anything. Nothing's negated. Our own common sense just tells us what feels right and what doesn't. So, like that meditation kind of reinforces a notion that I must do something to find inner peace. I mean, if you feel really peaceful in general when you go out for a walk, like, should we then not walk because that's reinforcing the idea that it's not the action that's doing that. That's just a thought doing that, and we can just look at that thought. So that I just wanted to share that because I have gotten a lot of questions and I know exactly where they come from, and it's totally understandable, but we can outgrow anyone telling us that we need to meditate or we don't need to meditate. You don't need to meditate is dogma exactly the same as you do need to meditate. There's nothing that's needed. And we're all feeling out for ourselves, just kind of what makes sense. Okay. So I've been talking a lot for a class about silence. So let me open it to you guys. If you have any questions, reflections, they can be about anything that was shared here at all, about the retreat, about not the about it doesn't matter. I'm open to anything. Um, will you do a retreat on the West Coast? I don't know. I'm going to do this one on the East Coast first, and we'll see. Maybe, but you can travel to the West Coast or to the East Coast. Not that bad. I would love to, though, by the way. Again, I don't know because I just have to kind of see how things unfold, but it really does feel to me like this is just and again that so many people are interested in this topic. This just feels like where things are headed, where maybe it's just, we're ready for it. We're ready for this. And so I would love to do more silent retreats, more so than talking stuff in the future, but we'll see. Samantha.
Hi, you may have said this, but do you have kind of a number of people that I'm sure you have like a group size number? I was just curious kind of how big, how small it would be.
Yeah. I don't remember the exact capacity possible, but it's around 25-ish. So it'll be a relatively small group. Yeah. Okay, hold on, let me get to some of these questions. Yes, so some of the logistics. I will be there. I believe I'll have a helper person, but again, for support, I'm just curious. It'll be mostly me. And I also wanted to mention that like the program, it's not much of a program because we're just in silence, but the structure of things, um, the leadership of it, the guided meditations, the Q&A, that's all going to be me doing it. And, we are at a center, and at the center, the retreat center that we're using, which I just had to switch to after the hurricane, it was going to be in Asheville, but we had to pivot. The retreat center we're using, a gorgeous place, but they mostly do Christian retreats. So I just say that because if you go look at the pictures, I think they might call themselves a Christian retreat center. There might be some Christian symbolism on the walls and things like that. But we're just using their space. It's not like there's no one there that's like helping doing anything there. It's just me leading it using their space. So on the support bit, yeah, it'll be mostly me, Karen. And again, I kind of just want to say, I don't know what you're imagining or what you're thinking about when you ask about support, for logistical stuff, even for chatting if you need to. I'll be there to support everyone because it'll be pretty small. And I'll talk about this there, but again, I just think it's really good to kind of get into this sort of sense of we're okay. Like we're designed for this. All we're doing is going back to what's supernatural. And even if emotion comes up, even if it feels really uncomfortable in moments, and it would only be moments, all of this you will watch it come and go. Um, in terms of like emotional support and that kind of thing, I think we just need so much less than our mind tells us we need. So I don't want to say that and everybody feel like you're just off on your own. Of course, if someone really needs support, you'll get support. But it's a good thing to feel into. It's a great thing to feel into and see, like, can I actually feel more than my mind tells me I can? Can I actually just sit this out? That's really what, I mean, I think in a lot of traditions, what a retreat like this is kind of about. Um, not in mine, because I personally don't do this, but for, in like a really strict like Zen Buddhist retreat, I mean, you sit in a very uncomfortable position and to your absolute best of your ability, you don't move a muscle. Like that is about showing yourself that discomfort can be here. Legs can cramp, body parts can go numb, and you're okay. So I'm not advocating that. You do that if you want to. You can also lay out and sprawl on the floor if you want to. You do whatever you want. But emotionally and mentally, I kind of guess I kind of am advocating that a little bit. So if that didn't answer your question, Karen, let me know. Why no eye contact? Again, I think it's just kind of like it's shocking sometimes to see the energy. It's so normal and we do it all the time and we're so used to it, but it also is kind of like outward looking, to be looking at people and to do all the little social things we do, to smile, to hey, how you doing, to all of that kind of stuff. It's just it's learned, it's learned, it's conditioned, it takes some effort, it takes some energy. And so to let all that energy and effort just stay here and to just really not have to follow those rules and follow all those conventions it's an interesting experience. I'll say that. So I think it's kind of fun to play with. Yes. Oh, great question. So Carolyn says in the evenings at the retreat, is it suggested we still be silent? And then stuff about screen time. So yes, it's suggested no eye contact, no speaking. So the retreat starts on a Sunday in the afternoon. We'll have an opening talk. We can all talk and hug and meet each other then, and then we'll have the dinner, the Sunday dinner, and then after that dinner is when the silence will begin. So it'll begin on that Sunday evening. And then we go until Friday at like 11 o'clock in the morning. So it's four and a half kind of days of the full silence. And then Friday morning. And then Friday morning, we'll have a silent breakfast. And then there'll be like a closing talk. And then we can all talk and scream and, tell stories, whatever you're dying to do. For me, when I finished a week of silent retreat, I couldn't even form a word. Not everyone, but a lot of the other people were like, blah, 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 blah. Oh my gosh, I couldn't wait to talk to you. And I was like, literally, like I came home and I was like my family was doing that at the dinner table. I'm like, I can't. But I don't want to, again, you can live your life. I mean, I worked and everything and the next day and it's fine. But man, everybody's different. Some people just can't wait to go back and some people just don't want to go back. Um, so that's the thing about that. In terms of screen time, and I would recommend that you don't. I would recommend to the best of your ability, you don't listen, you don't read books, listen to YouTube videos, that kind of thing. No, I'm not like taking phones or anything like that. You'll have your phone. For me, like I do because I have kids and stuff. Like I check my phone like once a day. So you can do that kind of thing if there's an emergency, it's totally up to you. It's not going to ruin anything. It's not going to ruin anything if you talk a little bit. It's fine. But I would just recommend kind of trying your best to minimize it. And there is, again, like places, there's not a whole lot that we're going to be doing. And between the silent kind of sitting, there's going to be breath work and there'll probably be some sound meditation. You can go for walks. There'll be meals. You can go back to your room and sit on the balcony. But it's not like a super entertaining thing, but it might be more entertaining than you think. Yeah, Magda, there's actually let me put the link in here. There's a sample schedule, not what I want. Um, like a daily kind of schedule on the website um, for the retreat. So that'll show you. I don't know how many minutes it is or even how many blocks it is. I want to say, I mean, there's probably at least 5 or 6 um, silent sessions, which would again be maybe 40 minutes or so each. But I'm just guessing at that right now. Um, how do I do this for everybody? I'm going to try to put it in the chat. I don't know why it's only letting me send it to like specific people in here, but oh, here we go. Yeah. So on that page, you'll see a PDF that shows kind of like a daily schedule, and it's subject to change, but you can yeah, I mean, Carolyn, like you can read it, it's up to you. Again, I kind of just like recommend not just because we want to kind of minimize external influences. But you know, if you feel like you need to, that's okay. Someone asked a question, is there something important about the 5 days? Nope. Uh, I think, I mean, people, I know that out there in the world, there are like weekend silent retreats. From my experience, I did like a 6 day. Um, Everybody's different. It felt like I needed, for me, a couple days, there was like a lot going on and something started to shift. And I heard this from others around maybe day 3 or 4. And then it really kind of deepened from there. So, but that is not a rule. For me, it just feels like a good chunk of time is 5, 6 days. But there's nothing really that magical about it. Um, I love all these questions. So, a question, would you recommend one way or another whether couples come together or not? That's a great question. Um, I think you just have to kind of know your couple. I think you totally can, totally can. And you probably would have a sense of how that would feel for you. I mean, people will share a room. Of course, that's not a couple, but it's not, you could be next to your partner and just get just as much out of it and I think that'd be really nice, actually, kind of that supportive source there, but you're still really committed to just, doing your thing. Um, so I don't see any reason not to, unless you know yourself or your partner and you think that wouldn't work. So could definitely do it. And of course, yeah, you can do shared rooms or private rooms at the retreat. Um, So, question, is this the same more or less than what Salvador Poe is sharing? Um, yeah, I mean, I think it's all the same. I don't think that he points to anything different. And I think it's just it's not a sharing, really. I mean, I think he would say that I think that we kind of are on the same page in our pointing. But that's kind of the awesome thing about this. That's the kind of the point is like the silence is the teacher. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to Sal. I mean, to the extent that you have and it's been helpful, great. But now we're like time to set that aside and let the silence be the teacher. It's right here. It's right here. And we're so conditioned to just listen to other people and keep looking. And this is not your fault. It's not my fault. It's no one's fault. I've been as felt like a seeker at times. Like it's nothing to feel ashamed of, but it's so good to see that we don't need to keep doing that. And sometimes we feel like we do. So if you're listening to this and you're like, heck no, I would never want to do that. I'm not ready for that. That's totally okay. I felt like that. And then one day I signed up for a retreat. I was like, I don't know what that's about, but like that's okay. You may not feel ready for this. You may not ever feel like you want to do this. It's fine. You might feel like, oh no, I'm still in a phase where I just want to like, soak up as much teaching as I can. That's beautiful. That's how it is sometimes. And if you feel like you're done soaking up teaching or it kind of isn't having that same impact, then this is just kind of another different direction. Um, okay, so Sophie says being inside, and sorry, this little thing is like covering your thing, but I think it says, yeah, being in silence, though, is being the one who watches what is happening, staying in the present moment. Um, I maybe it's interesting how that wants to happen. How thought wants to kind of form an identity. If I'm not Amy, the one with this past and future who's sitting in a silent retreat, I'm the watcher. I'm the awareness. That's okay. Like I'm not saying that's not helpful to some degree to maybe play with that and kind of maybe you do feel like the watcher or it really resonates with you to identify as the awareness or something like that. But I just to see that is also that's another identity. And it's not bad or wrong. It could be a really helpful step in a more expansive direction. But I would kind of encourage us to not need any of that. To watch, just watch. Again, you're not interfering with anything, but watch how the mind is scrambling to say, I'm the watcher, I'm the this, I'm the that, and just watch that. Isn't that interesting? That's just what it does. And we don't have to believe it. We don't have to disbelieve it. We don't have to shoo it away, but we also don't have to like jump in that costume and be that either. I hope that makes sense. I mean, so much that it's such a good question. And that is really so much of what this is kind of watching how the mind digs its heels in and does something like that, wants to form something or whatever. And then just kind of saying, oh, that's also a thought. I'm the watcher. That's a thought. And what happens when that thought leaves? What's still here? What remains when that thought is gone? And in a sense, that's what keeps happening is we're fully in what is from this vantage point of like that we rarely get of really watching it come and go, just having that possibility of seeing it like that. And it just gets clearer and clearer, where a position pops up or a thought pops up or an identity pops up. And that's happening all the time now. It's just kind of harder to see sometimes in our everyday life. But that said, I mean, again, for those of you who would never do a silent retreat, or at least not right now, um, you can see this. You can see this in your everyday life. It's not that same container, but I mean that, you can it happens all the time. You can play with just being in what is in everyday life. It doesn't have to take a lot of time. It doesn't need any special conditions. She says, yeah, I mean, without identifying to the watcher. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It sure seems like there's knowing, right? There's awareness. I mean, again, those are words, but um, this is known by something we don't know what, so to just sort of yeah, just watch how the mind wants to make it an identity and then just go back to like no, just kind of the essence of what is a little bit. Sonia says, what about sleepiness? I feel like fall asleep all the time when trying to meditate or just be or even listen to the calls like this. Is that something you try to avoid, like some teachers say, or just let it come and go? Yeah, I mean, my my inclination would be if you're sleepy, sleep. That's what is like. Again, the big overarching is like there's just nothing has to be different than it is. And of course, no one wants to go somewhere for 5 days and sleep the whole time, but I doubt that would happen. That's what the mind says. Oh, I need to like get the most out of this. Like just watch that. Because if that's coming up, that would come up for me. If that's coming up, then I bet you that comes up all over the place. Again, that's the cool stuff to see. Like how some people would just sleep and be like, oh, I guess my body needed sleep. Other people would sleep and be like, oh, I didn't get the most out of every second of what I paid for and what I traveled for. Like, well, both of those are just narratives. Those narratives come and go. What's here when the narratives have come and gone? What remains? So yeah, I think sleep is really normal. And and fine. And it's something to be curious about. I think sleep also or being feeling like, because you mentioned even on calls and stuff, feeling really sleepy, it can be a way that the mind's kind of like, we don't need this, so just be curious about it. It's not anything to worry about, but maybe it's like a little bit of the mind kind of trying to distract, and that could be good to see. um Stine says, I feel like I'd be ruminating the whole time. Maybe, but probably not the whole time. I'm sure you wouldn't the whole time. It might happen, especially initially, because when there's little freedom there, the mind likes to really kind of make itself seen. But but again, what I would say is that it's different than in everyday life, because we're in this place of like, oh, there's nothing that needs to be different than it is. Already rumination, what we call rumination, is not rumination when it's just free to be. It feels like rumination, really. I mean, I suppose it's just a word for like a lot of busy thinking, but it's not a neutral term. There's a judgment in there. I don't like this. It's uncomfortable, right? There's a lot of that. So it's like for the mind to be just letting off steam and doing what it needs to do. And there's just like, it just is what it is. This is what's happening right now. Man, I mean, it's an amazing feeling to see something like rumination and kind of feel it in that really open way and just not need it to be any different. And then, of course, typically in that, it wouldn't happen the whole time, but whatever happens, happens. Um, yeah. So another question about, is there a benefit to doing a group retreat rather than being alone? Um, I think it's preference, but I think it is. I think you do feel the energy of a group. You do, like, there's just something that I can't describe, but there really is a kind of back to the 5 day question too. It's like you kind of come together and you feel this sort of, anticipation and all that in that room. You walk into that room for those silent sessions on days like 3, 4, and 5, and it just feels different. I think there's a lot of love and compassion that comes up. Um, Again, like there's a closeness, there's just a sense of that. And I don't know, not that you couldn't feel that on your own. But it's kind of nice to do it with people. For me, like I said earlier, um, seeing other people go through their stuff and just watching how, like it started to just look really beautiful. Like there was someone in at my retreat who I knew was going through some grieving stuff because I knew them before. Um, and it just wasn't like, oh, I hope she's okay. She's having a hard time. There was just none of that. It was like, that's amazing. That's what has to happen. So I think there's something special about a group in some of those ways. And I'm sure there's benefits of doing it alone too. Okay. Okay. If you have more questions at any point, you can feel free to email me. I'm happy to answer questions that way, to talk with people about anything. And again, I'm so excited for this retreat, and I would love to see many of you there. But even if it's not for you, if you just have questions about anything that was shared here, or just how to incorporate silence more in general, or anything like that, just don't hesitate to reach out. Because I'm happy to talk more. So, um, what I would like to do is take just like a really quick break, like maybe 3 to 5 minutes, and just stay here if you can. But if you need to get up for a few minutes, go ahead. And then we'll come back, and I'm just going to just kind of start us off with a little bit of a guided meditation. And then we're going to have maybe 15 minutes to just kind of sit in silence and just kind of see, just experience what we've been talking about. So, yeah. So run if you have to. It's 3:30 Eastern time. It's half past the hour. So we'll start at, let's say, 35 past. Okay. Before we go into the meditation or the silence, I just want to speak to Marcus's question here in the chat because it's really great. So he says, you said that your experience after your first silent retreat was like the silence had shifted or changed place with the noise. Yes. Do you feel a need to maintain that silence since then in some way, or is it more in the foreground now than before? Um, yeah, I don't feel a need to maintain it. I don't even feel like I could maintain it. It doesn't feel like something that it's weird. It's not like it's kind of not, it's like it kind of doesn't really matter. It's just there. It's just known to be there. And when I say that, I don't mean that it's experienced all the time. There can be noise, there can be upset, there can be stress. But it's like this knowing that silence, it whatever we just call it silence, like that is untouchable and it is what is. It is the truth of things. There's such a deeper knowing of that, that even when it's not felt, even when there's not a feeling of peace, when there's a feeling of all kinds of other stuff, it just matters less. The other stuff doesn't shake from that knowing, if that makes sense. So that's how it feels. So no, I definitely don't. I mean, I will say like it feels easier to feel into that. It's like right here. So even in the middle of chaos, it sometimes just comes to mind, but it isn't a practice. It isn't anything I'm kind of trying to keep alive. It's just there and it's just alive. Um, and then he says, and how is this sitting in silence different to the insight that everything's thought and not letting your mind lead you astray? Um, yeah, that's such a good question too. It feels so completely different in a sense, and also the same. It's like kind of like I was saying in the beginning, like the words and the teachings and all the stuff we've explored and will continue to talk about and explore are so helpful. But what they do is kind of like turn and point toward this, like reality, like right, what's right here. And the silence is like, oh, it's like knowing that. It's like the experiential side of it rather than the classroom learning. My daughter is in driver's training right now. So she has her classroom learning and then she has her driving. And she's saying, like, the classroom stuff, I know I need it, but it's so stupid. The driving is really where it's at. And that's how this feels. That just popped in my head. But like there's a lot of classroom learning that can be excellent pointings, but nothing like actually doing it, not doing it, but you know what I mean. So I hope that helps. Okay. Okay, so thank you all for being here so much. And again, feel free to reach out anytime. I'll just kind of lead us into a little bit and then we can sit for like 20 minutes. I'll just sit here. You can have your eyes open or closed, whatever you're comfortable with. If you need to drop off sooner, it's totally fine. But at the top of the hour, I'll just stop the meeting. And so I might just say goodbye and I'll stop the meeting. And yeah, the recording will be available, Gay. So I won't say goodbye too much then. So again, thanks for being here. So yeah, eyes open, closed, whatever you're comfortable with. Just just take a minute to kind of look around. Guess if your eyes are open, that's easier. Listen around, hear the sounds, see what's here, kind of feel into the body, feel the sensation and the energy that might be there. Notice if thoughts are here. Notice the difference, if you do, between the activity of thought, like the movement of thought versus the very elaborate stories that thought tells. So we're right here, right now, and thought may be telling a story about what's going to happen later, and what this all means, and what you know and what you don't know. And none of that is really here. It's here in imagination. It's here as a narrative. It's here as a story. And then it will leave. And and there's so much more here that's perfectly fine. Whatever stories thought needs to tell, perfectly fine. And it's just one tiny little bit of what's really here right now. There's also every sound and every image and every little bit of energy you feel, the taste in your mouth, the temperature. And as much as thought likes to separate those and make boundaries around them, they're really not separate. They're not different things. If we just look into what's here right now, we can't tell where one sensation starts and another one stops. We can't tell where a sensation starts and sound stops, where a taste or a smell or a feeling starts and stops. It's just this, just whatever is sensed right here. Nothing could possibly be different than it is. Everything is just whatever it is. And something that was so helpful for me, that I heard, was about our tendency to kind of want to interact with thought, make it different, make it quieter, and how we can just imagine. We can never tame thought, but we can imagine that it's a bowl and it has a giant ring to run around in. So we don't need to get in there and try to wrestle that bowl and make it be some way other than it is. It'll tire itself out. It's fine either way. But we can kind of give it a big space. And really, in a sense, we can give everything a big space. Any emotion, any sense of restlessness or discomfort or excitement or anything that's showing up, just give it a big pen to run around in. You might start to notice that there's something here. It's not something we can think about or name or describe, but see if you can sense perhaps something that's always here. So, in that big pen, there's all kinds of narratives and images and memories and feelings and tastes and sensations and all of it coming and going. And there's something that I won't try to name, but there's something that's just always there, not moving. I just want to remind everyone that there's no way that was supposed to feel. It wasn't supposed to feel amazing or quiet or anything. It's just being with what is. So thank you guys so much for hanging on. Feel free to continue the silence if you're able. And I hope to see you all soon. Thank you.